All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kim Anderson, and I'm with the California Architectural Foundation, also known as CAF. We're so excited to have you here for our capX Emerging Professional Meetup, which is focused on helping you stand out as you prepare to enter the profession as a job shadower, an intern, or a job applicant. Tonight's session is part of capX, the California Architectural Practice Experience, a new statewide program developed by CAF to connect students and emerging professionals with firms and to develop a community in support of the next generation. This meetup will be recorded and uploaded to the CAF website and on the capX resource page. We are very grateful for the four incredible architect speakers joining us tonight. Mark Graham, AIA, is a partner with PBK Architects. Karina Mills, AIA Director of Talent at RDC S111 and our 2025 AIA California President. Betsy Olenek Dougherty, FAIA, is Managing Principal for Perkins Eastman. And Andrew Goodwin, AIA, is owner of Andrew Goodwin Designs and a current lecturer at Cal Poly San Francisco. In the interest of time, they're impressive here on the slide deck, which will be emailed to all of you after the meetup. Yes, it is tiny font. Our goal tonight is to share candid, practical advice on how to stand out when applying for jobs, building a portfolio, interviewing, and how community engagement can set you apart. And we're going to kick off with Mark Graham, AIA. Mark, can you share what firms actually look for in a resume and offer up at least two immediate changes our attendees can make to help strengthen their resume?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight and kind of share some of the things that we look at, I guess, in resumes. And I've had a chance as a senior principal with PBK Architects, one of the or the largest educational firm in the nation right now. And so we do look at a lot of resumes, and I have over the last, several years. But I think just kind of starting off, some of the main things that kind of stand out with resumes is making sure, and these are just simple things as I kind of start off with, and that is basically checking the spelling. I mean, making sure that spelling syntax is there. It is something that, these days there's no reason why there should be typos or any of those kind of things on your resume. Um, as far as like the font that you use in your resume, that sort of thing, making sure that it's crisp and clear, that it's actually at a certain, height, as far as size is concerned, 12 point normally is kind of a minimum size that you'd probably want to go with on resumes so that people can read them easily, especially older folks like myself who sometimes have, difficulty seeing smaller font than that. But I think, that sort of thing is some of the things that are important. I think, the other portion is just having that can-do attitude and being able to express that you're willing to kind of do what it takes to get the job done, and working with the team and that sort of thing is important too. Um, I would say, lots of times we see a lot of resumes where they don't really seem to have that team collaborative, kind of a work ethic. And in school, sometimes it might be that you're not working as as a team. You're kind of focusing on your own project, but it is something as you get into the workforce, we want to have knowledge of that sort of thing as well. That you had experience with, you will probably be working as a team and kind of working through that appropriately. In regards to working with community organizations, other than just, basically, the products that you've developed in school and that sort of thing, it would be good to kind of show some history of that sort of thing, kind of working in areas again where you kind of collaborated and you were being able to kind of connect with, I guess, organizations that might even be outside of the groups that you've worked with in school. So, it could be a Habitat for Humanity, kind of a project or something like that. It would be good to kind of list all that sort of thing. And also, you might have gone for design competitions, worked with people, and going after a design award and that sort of thing as well. So I think, working through developing and interfacing, in those kind of arenas are going to be helpful also. Um, you're, I think, a lot of you, if you have just got out of school or that sort of thing, most of you probably haven't had too many jobs under your belt to show. But if you have to the point where you've been working and if you have multiple firms that you've worked for in 1 year, that can sometimes be kind of a challenge. So you want to be careful how you word it and how you work through that, especially when you're first starting out and developing that experience. It always is we're looking for strong background and, strong connectivities and connections that you've had. But of course, you want to be able to show the experience you've had, like not only working in the office on details, but perhaps also being out in the field and having some experience with construction administration, that sort of thing, because it is more than just design. Design is only probably about, 10% of the overall product delivery process. So having that experience in turning at different firms is probably helpful also. I think I mentioned just really quickly, the student design awards are helpful, and you might want to make sure that you've done research on the firm that you're going to try to work with. And so, like, say for instance, our firm is a school, educational firm. So basically, you might before you do get out or have, gotten out, that you've had that experience, maybe in doing a school project and sharing some of the things that basically could actually be related to the work that you're going after, which is important as well. So I would think, beyond that, I think, I kind of picked up on something else here. Just, the degrees, of course, you want to be able to show that your good, strong communication skills, a good, strong ethic, that you have good ethics too. That's important. That's a term that, sometimes is missed with people, but it really is important that the employer can trust you and that you're going to be doing the right thing and kind of, even when things get difficult, you're going to follow through and, going to show up, to the lots of times it's just about showing up to being there and that you've had a history of doing, that. Flexibility, adaptability, analytical, quantitative skills, that sort of thing is also, helpful also in just making sure that you can do that. And of course, design, you want to have a strong portfolio as far as your design is concerned. So you want to be able to kind of pair that with, that resume, and be able to kind of move forward it. But it is something that you want to have really good, architectural lettering, things like that in your resume and kind of working through that also. So I'll kind of leave it at that because I know the others are going to actually segue into expanding upon what I'm talking about with their presentations. But those are some of the main items right there that I would say that you'd want to at least start out with.
Thank you. Did any of the other panelists have anything to add as far as resumes to what Mark has shared?
Just a reminder for everybody that they'll be able to take this home. So all the content that they'll be receiving, they'll be able to go back and refer to it later. Because Mark is just touching the iceberg, and that was a lot. So
It was. So proofreader, get a proofreader, don't have typos, make it visually appealing and readable, even for people that may not have the best device. Keep it to a page. And, I think typos, we talked about that. It's such an easy thing, but, we're all busy. So that's a first impression. All
I
right.
think the other thing too, I was going to say too, is, in the age of AI, I mean, sometimes you can have AI help you, as a guide, and kind of working through it. Not that you're going to plagiarize what AI is saying because you want it to be you, but it is something that, you have as a wonderful tool to be able to kind of develop and expand upon your resume appropriately as well. So just keeping up with the times.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mark. We're going to move on to Andrew Goodwin, who's going to talk about building a memorable portfolio. So as an applicant, how can you better showcase your skills, strengths, and individuality? Andrew?
Great, thank you. Um, so first of all, I just want to preface that I teach a course at Cal Poly on portfolio, and so a lot of this comes from that course and the ideas behind how to generate a portfolio that can speak your language. So you'll see some things in here that I want to present because portfolios are naturally graphic and you need to understand what you're looking for. But let me just start by saying three things. It is important to first know your audience. A portfolio in general should be curated for the firm that you're going to be talking to. Just like what Mark was saying about this idea of having a school project within a school application, it's important to know what the person's going to be looking for. So know your audience. Curating that portfolio is super important. On top of that, you need to be yourself. I don't know how many times I've actually looked into a portfolio and realized that people were just filling in the gaps. They were saying like what they did, but not who they were. And a lot of times firms are not only looking for help, somebody to fill a position, but they're looking for somebody to fit in. So being yourself is really important because it'll teach the person that's looking at the portfolio who you are and how you might be able to add to the firm. And then the last thing, which I was telling Kim the other day, is actually portfolio is a career thing. It's not a job application thing. I teach all my students that portfolios should be maintained. They should not be something that you do for your first job and then forget about. It should be a career thing. So understand that you can add and add and add. But even the busiest of firm owners won't want to see the full portfolio. And again, that's why you want to curate it specifically for what people are looking for. So let me go over 4 things that I find really valuable in developing that portfolio so that you can showcase your skills and your strengths. The first thing is graphic language. Next slide, please. You need to be able to control the visual continuity. And literally, graphics is not something that we teach in architecture all the time, but it is an art in itself. And so being able to select visually appealing elements in your portfolio is super important. That also includes your symbols, your typography, the colors that you use, creating a brand and an identity for yourself. Mark might even say, in a sense, you can follow that all the way to the resume. So if your resume looks a lot like your portfolio, thumbs up. So think about your graphic design skills. Next, please. The other thing is many firm owners, especially if you're going after a design-heavy firm, will understand the power of graphic design. So if they can see in your portfolio, you can control your lines, your spacing, your white space. You have authority over your typography. That means that you can also have authority over the designs of architecture. It's a very, very easy translatable thing. So know that what you can produce graphically is just as important as what you can produce architecturally. Next, please. In some of the books, and I'll show you a book that you guys can write down and look into later, but in some of the books that I present in my classes, we talk about a lot of things that you need to understand about in the portfolio and in graphic communication to really have a successful way of looking through things. These include graphic standards like unity and harmony and contrast, knowing the scale and proportion of objects, balancing your pages. So if you're printing out a portfolio, seeing the balance in front of you, or if it's digitally on the screen in a PDF, seeing the balance as you walk through that PDF. And at the same time, repetition, because the eye loves repetition. And if you can create a repetition in your portfolio, you create speed in which the reader will go through the portfolio. Next, please. This book is something that I highly recommend if you need to read something. It's by Margaret Fletcher, Constructing a Persuasive Portfolio. She's done an amazing job of understanding how to put together that portfolio. And in this, next please, she goes through how to lay out the portfolio. So graphically, knowing that you have a front matter, content, and a back matter, and it all becomes extremely important to the balance and the speed of which you present your information. Next, please. And within those pages, you should understand that you have control over that grid and the content that will be presented, knowing that it doesn't have to be the exact same page format for every single spread, but that you can introduce columns and grids that are repeated throughout the process to adapt to the images, the text, the form generation diagrams that you want to present. Next, please. So here's an example of understanding. At the bottom, you can start to see graphically how these spreads can start to balance, and then how it would look on the pages with the balance of an image and text. And then on the right side, the graphic understanding of a form generation axon versus the rendering on the left. And you need to be able to shift between these pages for the different projects so that you're creating a graphically inclusive but also impressive portfolio. Next, please. This is an example of one of my students that went through and categorized some work of a firm. And this was a exercise to show a portfolio of a firm that was not his, but then seeing how the different projects themselves could be laid out. Next, please. The repetition of the firm's work could be seen graphically in where typography was located and other content. But then as it got into the project itself and how you iterate the project, strategically you can change the page and you can introduce patterns and rhythms and repetition that respond to form generation diagrams, diagrams and iteration of site plans and things like that. Next, please. The second thing I want to talk about is storytelling. So we talk about graphic language and how important it is. It's also really important to know how to tell a story. And this is not only the story of your brand, so the color, the font, the graphics. Logos are a little cheesy. Be careful about logos for yourself. But if you create your brand, that's storytelling. And that needs to be consistent throughout the whole thing. And on top of this, you need to ask yourself, do your projects tell a story? You know, can you understand the who, what, when, and how of that project when you're not there to present it? In this day and age, you're sending a portfolio via email. You're not talking to the person. That's the most common way of delivering a portfolio. So does it speak for itself? Does the spread speak to the project? Do you need to add key phrases and text? Do you need to lead the audience to the concepts from concept design to final iteration? And then are you showing your best images? Next, please. So here's a good example of a branded storytelling exercise. The colors, the font, the graphics are all cohesive, even though they're all different. The example of storytelling through graphics. Next, please. When you take this storytelling and you apply it to a project, you start to see how you can create mood and tell a story of the context of the project. This is a project that is a chapel. So it's very moody in general. Next, please. And the next pages, as you go through, the graphics tell this story very easily. You have key phrases and text that start to lead your eye to the concepts that you want to talk about, designing for sight, designing for comfort. Next, please. And then leading the eye to some of the most impressive detailed information that you can to tell that story. Next, please. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is variety. Variety is super important in this matter because you are not going in necessarily to be a designer. You're going to evolve and become somebody that does production, somebody that understands architectural detailing, and that becomes important. So you need to show that you can do a lot. Next, please. This again is the same student, Justin Grillo. He basically took an opportunity and to show the line work drawings, the model making, the rendering capabilities of his work in one project. Next, please. So you're leading the person that's reading this to an assumption that this person has a variety of skills and knows how to conceptually talk about architecture through a variety of representation styles. So the form generation diagram, the line work drawings like floor plan, section, site plan, and then simple renderings for concept. Next, please. That leads to the idea of more technical information, sections that talk to the architecture and the tectonics of the building. Next, please. And lastly, model making. He had a tremendous strength in model making, so we wanted to show the variety that he could provide in model making. Next, please. And lastly, and one of my most important, especially for when I'm looking at portfolios, is life outside of architecture. Next, please. I think that it's really important that in your portfolio you show some humanity outside of architecture of what you like to do, but something that's closely related to the arts and architecture and construction movement. This, for example, is a piece of furniture that somebody was doing, but showing that you can build with your hands, that you have an affinity for how things go together in detailing. Next, please. Similarly, have students that do the Cal Poly float at the Rose Parade. And so understanding that if that's something outside of architecture, how does that also apply their design skills to something practical? Next, please. And this includes the little detailed drawings that you have to create the floats. And then some aspect that is architecture. And so it's really important to see, maybe that's life outside of the firm. Maybe there's something that appeals to you as a firm owner that you can say is really appealing here. Next, please. And I think last but not least, this is most likely my last one, is fashion. I have a student that is a tremendous fashion designer. And I fell in love with the idea that there's tactility and the ability to create in furniture but to create fashion and create dresses at a finer level of detail and just ability that really appeals to other things that can happen. Next, please. I think that was it. Oh, and last but not least, yeah, sketching. This is a idea of how do you sketch in the wild? I think it's important to continue to tell the story by hand. And if you can sit in a meeting with a client and sketch with a principal architect, you're invaluable. That's a great asset to have. So show that you can sketch too.
We go on. Thank you, Andrew. You should teach a class on this. Just kidding. For the other presenters, anything to add to portfolios that Andrew didn't touch on? He went pretty in depth there. This is more conversational, but he had this information because he teaches this course. So is there anything from a hiring standpoint that you look for in a portfolio?
One of the
I would just expand on these last few examples of showing, sort of the creativity beyond the sort of traditional architecture and design. These are really wonderful examples that, there are people who are into making jewelry or leather craft or anything that involves like designing and making is going to convey a talent, that translates. And so I just wanted to plus one to that and sort of expand upon it. And yeah, I'll continue on with some of these themes too.
Yeah, I would say, and it's just beautiful. I love the images that you shared there, Andrew. Along with images like that from the architecture, design, and this kind of imagery. If you've had any technical experience where I know like the Cal Poly, especially Cal Poly Pomona, has a class that shows putting together technical drawings, an actual construction document set. And so if you could show some of that as well, I think and kind of expand upon that in your experience of things that you would be able to do. A lot of our work that we do is Revit based. And so just a simple thing of understanding how to kind of work through imagery and putting together that's a helpful thing to show right off the bat as well.
Absolutely.
And Betsy, did you have a comment?
That's fine. We got a lot to talk about. You guys are doing a great job.
So curate your portfolio, be yourself, and think of it as something you have for your whole career, not just when you're starting out. Okay, thank you, Andrew, again. Next up is Karina Mills, AIA. Karina, when it comes to interviews, can you share advice on how to shine, what to avoid, and how to prepare?
Yes, happy to. I, in my role, do a lot of coordination of screening candidates. I get to look at these resumes and portfolios and forward them along to hiring managers. So everything that Mark and Andrew just described are very much, I can echo that there's truth in that as I'm an initial screener that passes the candidates that I know my team is looking for, and then help coach both my team members through the interview process and field their feedback after an interview occurs. So I've got lots of experience and stories in the space. And just as Mark and Andrew were describing, having a resume that shows your graphic ability and tells a story of who you are and conveys that you have an understanding of who it is that you're looking to work with and that there's been some research done there. All of that is like, I've made the analogy many times that interviewing is a little bit like dating. So like that's your dating profile, but this is like the actual meeting, right, that you're going to have. So a lot rides on it. A lot of times now in this virtual interaction world, there's a screening call. Sometimes that's a phone call. Sometimes it's a Teams call. I know for a lot of our team members now, where it used to be an in-person interview right away, there's oftentimes a virtual meeting first. And then if that goes well, there's a follow-up. So I will start with, when you're in a screening environment, make sure that you take that as seriously as an in-person interview. If you don't, make sure that your setting that you're in is not distracting. I had one interview manager tell me that they couldn't stop paying attention to the background because there was like a mattress standing up in the background, and they were just like in their head, why is this happening? So just make sure, like, if you can't get into a clean background, blur your background, put on a virtual background, there's a lot of options. And so you just want to demonstrate that you're attentive to that and that you're not distracted. So You know, if you have a dog or a small one or something, just make sure that you kind of clear the environment and that you can be dedicated to that conversation. Because again, all of these things are giving your interview team cues to how you're going to be able to be working as in a professional setting. So you want to be able to demonstrate that you can be focused and not distracted. So most importantly, again, going to the dating analogy, this is your chance to get to know who it is that you want to work with and for them to get to know you. And so you really want to convey who you are. It's super important that you've done research to understand who it is that you're speaking with. So each and every one of the firms that you're going to go interview with, you need to take a look at their website and to really explore, you know, what is their history? What are they about? What are their values? Go beyond the website, go to their LinkedIn page, see what they've been posting about. You want to be able to be prepared to say, I'm excited about the same thing that you're excited about, and this is why we want to work together. While it's very important to be prepared, it's also just as important to make sure that you haven't like prepared a script in your head that you are tied to, so much so that you can't respond to the people in the room. You want to be able to be flexible and adaptable. Again, these are all relatable to what it's like to work in the actual office setting or project setting. So you need to demonstrate that you can be a good listener. So in some of these stories that I've heard, to illustrate this example, somebody comes in very, you know, passionate to go through their portfolio, and they're like, let me go through it. And they're not receptive to the interview team who's trying to interject and say, I have questions about this project, or we don't have time to go through your entire portfolio. Can you show me one or two projects that are most exciting to you that might be most relevant to the work that we're doing here? Be sure that you're paying attention to the room, you're reading the room, and you're receptive to pausing and pivoting with what you may have planned and scripted for your interview. Again, this is really about conveying who you are in a work in a setting. You want to be able to make sure that they know that you can listen and that you can be responsive to those cues. So again, most importantly, it's, you know, making sure that folks know that you care enough about their time that they've carved out to sit down and meet with you, that you've done the research about what is the history of this firm? What is the work that they're doing? And what are the things that they're passionate about? Why do you want to work for them? And then there also needs to be, you know, a compelling pitch that you're bringing about why you're really aligned with all of those things. So if you don't have time to go through your entire portfolio, which is very likely, which are the projects in your portfolio that are most aligned with the values of the firm and the team members that you're sitting down with? And you may even have the opportunity to ask with whoever you're communicating with at the firm who's setting up your interview, they should be able to tell you who's going to be in your interview. So you may even go a little bit further to, you know, look at those particular individual profiles and sort of what are the projects that they work on. You may be working for a firm that does institutional work. Are they in a healthcare setting, a higher education setting, a justice setting? You may want to know what is the background of the people that you're speaking with, and be prepared with questions. If you go in and you give your whole spiel, these are my projects, this is what I'm excited about. Yes, I can do Revit. I'm eager to work with you. And they give you their spiel and they say, okay, do you have any questions? If you don't have anything, it's telling of like a lack of intrigue, or just, you know, we want to have a banter. And so be sure that you ask questions, and I would challenge you to ask tough questions. A lot of talent are wanting to know about culture. Ask that question, but be specific. You know, what are the type of extracurricular activities that people get into? What are the type of continuing education opportunities that are here? You know, things like that. What does your EDI program look like? So I know I really want, whatever it is that matters to you, be prepared to ask those questions. And also to some of the previous comments made by Mark and Andrew about showing things that stand out or set you apart from just your portfolio work. Similar to the concept of sharing design skills like sketching and furniture design and fashion design. There's also a lot of value in your volunteer time and the way that you get involved with professional associations or student associations. All of those things, you know, show passion, commitment, dedication, and leadership skills. So don't be afraid to talk about those things. And if they are something that you want to speak to, make sure that they're showing up in your resume or your portfolio. As somebody who does a lot of screening, also echoing what Andrew said, I really love when the resume and the portfolio are actually like the resumes at the first couple pages of the portfolio package, and it really shows that you've been thinking about the overall graphic package. And it makes it easy for me to send one file to those hiring managers. So just a couple of tips, but most importantly, and we get these messages too when you become a practicing architect and you're going to interview with the client, it's a lot of the same advice. You want to convey to your client team that I'm somebody you want to work with. So be authentic.
That's great, Karina. That's great advice. Do any of our other panelists have anything to add?
I know there was also actually a comment about dressing for success, so this is something that has come up, for as long as I've been talking about interviews, and it is really important. You want to dress for a professional setting. We are also a community of creatives, right? So I think that overall your look does relay something about you, right? You're being assessed the way that you show up, especially to that in-person interview, but it shows up in the virtual interviews as well. So just as much as your, background doesn't want to be distracting, you want to be composed. Don't be in your hoodie or your t-shirt just because you're on a video call. But I will say too, I have worked for an office here in Long Beach, and we are not a, suit and tie culture. So it does go to understanding the firm. There is like a certain level of sort of aesthetic. Let's just kind of package it as aesthetic, like be conscientious, but again, what's most important is to be authentic. And so I've had a couple of hiring managers actually be a little bit dismissive of somebody who shows up in sort of a generic suit, and be a little bit more interested in somebody who's like, they're professional, but there's a fashion sense that's demonstrating a bit of creativity. So just all, important things to consider, but most importantly, that you're demonstrating a level of professionalism and you're showing up in a way that is appropriate to a professional office space.
That's great. One of the things the panelists talked about when we met before this event was about looking, you mentioned researching earlier. And if you find that maybe the firm is struggling in an area, that you could, in a positive way, reinforce that you might meet that need. So I think, Mark, maybe you had mentioned that. Does that ring a bell at all?
Well, I think the thing is that, yeah, you want to, and I'm not sure I'm going to answer this well, but I mean, you want to be able to read the room. I think that you can do that in many ways, and just doing your research, making sure that you can even ask, perhaps, before you go into the interview, who would be interviewing with us, or who am I going to be interviewing, so you can get yourself a little bit better prepared for that as well. But just, I think overall, you want to know as much as possible. You want to be able to listen to it. And even, I think, Kimberly, is there anything else I can add to that or expound upon that? I just want to make sure I answered that as well.
No, I think you did. I think you did. And Karina, when you talk about culture and fit and kind of, do you think, is it recommended, obviously beyond the website or beyond a firm's website, would you recommend an office visit, like just peeking in and kind of getting, or do you not recommend that if it's feasible, if you live in the area?
If you live in the area, I think it's a great thing to do, to drop by and hand in, a paper resume just to reinforce like I applied, but I live in the community. I will say that there's sometimes some preference for folks who are local, right? And there's an investment. I know my firm does a lot of local work, and so people who live in the community and care for the community, there's a little bit of a competitive advantage there. That's not always going to be the case. You may be working for a firm that does a lot of international work, and mostly has a remote culture. So again, it's understanding the portfolio, the firm and their portfolio work and how that aligns with you. And so, Mark was also adding to Andrew's presentation about portfolio, the importance of bringing in some technical samples. You really want to be able to show the work that they're going to be asking you to do. And a lot of firms are looking for folks who can get into Revit, who can help with the production of contract documents. And you may be not yet at that stage. You may be mostly a design portfolio, but whatever you have that starts to demonstrate your proficiency in those platforms, process documents that convey what it is that your design portfolio or I'm sorry, in your portfolio, what your design process looks like and the tools that you're using. That's all really valuable to a hiring manager to understand how might they be able to fit you into their design process and be able to make you productive for their projects. So to the best of your ability, bring samples of work that you've either done in previous internships, or if you've got projects in school that are helping you build your skills in terms of putting together contract document sets. Don't be afraid to bring those along. They are really helpful in terms of conveying that you're starting along that path. And then make sure that you're continuing to incorporate your best of samples. To Andrew's point, if this is a lifelong document, you know, I work with recruiting all through the career spectrum, and there are actually a lot of instances where we have people at the project architect, project manager level who haven't kept up a portfolio, and it takes away from their competitive advantage from the people who have. So, you know, depending on what your path is, if you're really pursuing a design track, you certainly want to be able to show design process and design outcomes, demonstrate and can be able to communicate the tools that you're using to, you know, and the process. And then similarly, there is, again, a lot of demand for the documentation side to be able to show samples of those things. Details, you know, once you get into that side of the spectrum, being able to show that you know, really understand how things are put together is very important and will set you apart.
That's great. Do any of the panelists have anything to add before we move on to
Oh, I
our?
have lots to add, but just
Yes,
briefly
go
to
ahead.
build upon.
You're next, Betsy.
I know, but Karina and Mark's reference to Revit can't be understated. Because if you're hiring a new young person, you want them to be able to be proficient in what is basically a fundamental skill set to be able to begin to work your way into a firm. So if you can't take a course in Revit in school, and I hope that every single one of your schools offer Revit classes, you can go online and take tutorials in Revit online and practice on your own. And I think many of them are free. So you can just find it because of course they're selling. So that was just something I wanted to add. And the one other thing, Karina, that you started talking about all these people in the room, this can be very intimidating.
Yep.
For anybody to be considering as much homework as you do. You walk in to the room and you understand you're going to be meeting with a principal and there are 3 people in the room and you're just floored. And I've seen people freeze in their tracks. I mean, they just become so nervous. Don't let that happen to you. Be prepared for that outcome because it could happen. Anyway.
Yeah. Give it, and so to that end, right, it's a nerve-wracking experience, right? Going back to the dating analogy,
Sure.
like, oh, I really want this person to like me. Give yourself extra time. Ask in advance, like, I have a portfolio to share. Do I bring a digital file and a flash drive? You know, just make sure that you're conveying that you want the experience to go well and you're asking questions ahead of time, and just give yourself a little bit of time. Take deep breaths. But yeah, all really important. And I was gonna say too about Revit, once you get the job, whether it's an internship or a designer opportunity, make sure that you're continuing to advocate for yourself to be able to continue to build your Revit skills. Be proactive in terms of asking for those opportunities.
Great. Okay, I'm gonna.
Kim, you just muted.
Thank you, Karina. I really appreciate that. I thought I was unmuting. All right, so to close out our speaker lineup, Betsy Olenek-Dougherty, FAIA, will discuss how community engagement can shape how you are perceived by firms and how this can help differentiate you from other candidates. So Betsy, can you speak to this?
Thank you, Kim. This is a big subject. So I have very little time to talk about it, but I would like to just talk about a few things, and that is the selection process goes both ways. So you may be the candidate that the firm is looking for or not. You may find that the firm is not the right fit. So Mark's comment about being the right fit is spot on, and it does go both ways. As you know, this is a team sport that we're in. It's very complicated, design and construction of buildings and master planning and working with a team full of engineers and clients and community. And that is something that you need to appreciate, that as architects, we're always told that we use the left side of our brains, and you know, we're very, very visual spatial, but we're also auditory, because when you're standing up in front of a community to make a presentation, you need to feel comfortable. And as you know, that's the thing that people fear most, is public speaking. So be sure and just spend some time looking at your whole person and how you convey and how you work as a team member, because this is a team sport. It's all about relationships. Your relationships will last a lifetime. I like to say that at this point in my career, I have friends who my favorite people are architects, of course, and we've been friendly competitors for years. We respect one another, and it is a community. This probably more than other professions really does have that community sense. And part of it is that you're working with a team of visual, spatial, creative people. It doesn't get any better than that. And a lot of us are very involved in our communities. And this idea of community can be a whole number of interpretations. And well, Kim mentioned that, yes, I've done a lot of community engagement. I've been actively involved in AIA since I was an associate member, and invited ourselves to board meetings when associates weren't allowed in board meetings. One of those, Berkeley in the 60s. That probably tells you all you need to know about me. But it's working with the community within the firm, and that's doing your homework, and then the community at large also, because you really need to be that whole person, and you bring that whole personality to your role. So if you're involved in nonprofits, I know that Andrew has specifically talked about that a little bit. That says a lot about you. That's extremely important, and it has great value, particularly when you're working with groups, because as a team player, it's not just one person you're listening to. There's a multitude of people who input, and it becomes very complicated. So if you can indicate on your resume, in your portfolio, and through the interview, so putting all of these pieces together, that you can convey your comfort in community and teamwork settings, and this will separate you from the rest, because it will be evident in the materials that you provide, in the way you conduct yourself, and the questions you ask of the interviewers. Remember, they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. So just the things that you are interested in, and if you can convey that, it's going to have a tremendous impact upon whether or not you're the person who's selected, because that says more about you, maybe even than some other things might. So you have to feel comfortable working with the community at large and working with individual communities, and particularly if you are visual, spatial, and auditory, because it does take both. So generally the whole idea of communications is key for community involvement. So if any of you have engaged with community nonprofits, or whether it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, whatever the Girls and Boys Clubs, they're all so important to your community. And if you understand that and you have a sensitivity toward that, you will find that it's a skill set that will pay the dividends in the long run. And I also, before I forget, I cannot believe how few firms tell people that they're interviewing that if you are graduating now, you can join AIA for a year for free. All of the resources, and obviously I'm an AIA junkie, but all of the resources that are available to young people through AIA are handed to you for free, and all of the resources that go along with it. And even when you're still in school, you can call your local AIA chapter and invite yourself to their events. And usually they will not charge you for them. You can show up. You're going to meet architects at those events, firm owners, people who think like you do, and then you're attracted and you're doing your homework in that respect. So this is a community of professionals. It's amazing. It's been one of the joys of my life. My husband and I are both architects, and we have 2 children, and believe it or not, yes, they are both architects. So I don't know how that happened, because of course your kids will tell you, I don't want to be an architect, you work too hard. But it's really an important part of life, and it's very holistic. So you're not talking about just a job. You're talking about a career and a quality of life. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of all of these things that are available to you. And now you know that Kim has made this document available to you as well. So not only do you see the graphics, but you'll hear the auditory as well. And so you don't have to be taking notes. So Kim, thank you for doing such a great job bringing us together. Andrew, Karina, and Mark, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and we actually have, we have some time for Q&A. Thank you, Betsy. That was
Let's go for it.
amazing. And I wanted to ask if any of our panelists had anything to add about community engagement. I think you kind of hit on all the points, but maybe there's something to emphasize that Betsy shared.
One of the things I will mention is that if you do show an affinity to helping others, through community engagement or volunteering, it also shows to most firm owners that you're willing to help them.
Mhm.
And that attitude of being sacrificial in your help and sacrificial in your volunteering is something that is extremely valuable in the firm. Sometimes we all need to come together to finish a project, to compete on an RFP, to get some graphics out at the last minute, and to have somebody that already knows what it's like to give wholeheartedly without needing to ask for it, is really, really important in that kind of scenario. So it's good to have it on there. And if you don't have it on there, it's not too late to join and to volunteer and to learn what it's like to do that. There's plenty of organizations around towns that need that.
Yeah, I think that, community engagement, it's not always how what you're giving, but it's also going to, how can I put it, how it changes you in the process as well, how it enhances your knowledge of things that you might not have been aware of. It really, it's always been for me, um, you know, wow, I didn't know that. I learned something new that I wasn't aware of, that it enhanced my career as kind of a citizen architect and kind of moving in that direction. So it's definitely it's a powerful piece to be able to be involved in that way as well. And employers love to see that.
I
It's
have to
very-
+1 to your comment, Betsy, about showing up at the AI events where people who are looking for new architect and new talent, make those casual conversations. We have a program here in Long Beach called Architecture, and I can't tell you how many times I have overheard a practice owner say, "Oh, you're looking for a job? Here's my card, give me a call."
And I ran a chapter for a number of years, and oftentimes we'd have job applicants who were struggling, they weren't getting interviews, and they would volunteer for a chapter event and make a direct connection that would result in a job. So think of it, it's just good all the way around. So I would like to invite our group to ask any questions, or you've got an amazing group of architects here at your pleasure to answer any questions you might have. So, Anne, I love that you have your camera on. Thank you so much. And if anyone else wants to turn on their camera for this portion, we'd appreciate that. It's always nice to see faces. Let me see, is there a question in the chat? Looks like we have a question. The person that posted that, would you like to ask that question directly?
Yes.
Great. Go ahead. Is it Karina?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, hello. I really appreciate all the comments today, and I took a lot of notes. It was really insightful. Yes, I do understand that this meeting was mainly for students or for emerging professionals who just graduated. But I am new to US. I worked in Germany mostly until last year, and right now I am also looking at the market here, mainly here in California, and also working on my portfolio. So yeah, Andrew's comments were really much appreciated. So would you have any specific advice for people like me who didn't study here maybe, and who just came here and are looking to apply and to interview with American companies?
Let me just first by saying, don't discredit the fact that you are an architect from an international experience. I'm hoping that that's not what's coming across, but your international experience is just like anybody else's experience, and the fact that it needs to be documented well. It needs to come across as to what your capabilities are and what your passions are. And I don't think that that's going to be any different than anybody else in the situation. And I would actually say that your experience is probably very warranted and needed in a lot of situations. I know a firm up in San Francisco that hires a lot of international architects and staff because of the diversity of thought and the diversity of experience, and they see that as like a checkbox right away. So just prepare. And my best advice would be prepare the resume and prepare the portfolio and the best capability to show who you are, to be yourself. If you can grab that old experience and put it on some really compelling graphic pages, great. But I don't think that there's anything different necessarily in your situation that should prohibit you from doing what we're talking about here.
would you be willing to share the name of that firm? Or I can also check online on Indeed. My main source of my main source of job openings are Indeed. I don't know if there are many that you would recommend, other ones.
Local
Well,
chapters.
yeah, and honestly, you can message me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to kind of connect some dots. But I would say that any firm that is larger scale that does some international work or larger projects would be a place that I would look immediately. They're used to this, so that's a good starting point for sure.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would look for firms that are doing international work. And again, to the point that we've made about, what's really important is that you're familiar with the tools and the process. And so to the best of your ability, showing your strength in Revit and the design platform tools, showing your process. And I think if you're talking to the right firm, you can build up your international experience as an advantage.
One thing I might suggest, Karina, is make sure that you have a handle on metric versus imperial measurement. That's really important.
Which trick? Excuse me.
Metric.
Metric. Sorry. Metric
Versus
Units,
imperial.
yeah. Make sure you're
Yes.
comfortable with units, yeah.
Yes, I did have some issues with that.
We have another question from Nate. He asked that I share the question with the panel on his behalf. Circling back to the comment about resume length, is a one-page format a standard, or is it acceptable to stretch to 2 if you have appropriate content? Mark, since you touched base on resumes, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're in the soundbite kind of generation age right now, so the one page is very nice to see. I mean, looking at a one-page resume and it having a lot of the information there at the point size that I was talking to is kind of important. But you could stretch it to 2 pages. I mean, that's not an issue if you have that extensive amount of information to share. But just be clear and be discreet. Having a lot of rambling information that's hard to read is not something that appeals. So I would just say, just like the image that's on the screen right now, it's simple fonts, easily readable. That kind of thing is what we're looking at and kind of working from there. But so often I've had it where like say for instance, the HR department has sent a resume, to say 3 or 4 different principals who were interviewing. And just keeping it nice and elegant and simple is probably a good way of going about it. So just keep that in mind.
I would just like to add, I see a lot of resumes that are 2 pages, 1 page front and back, right? So again, you came to the office, you dropped it at the front desk, it's 1 page front and back. If you're going to go beyond the single one side and you're going to go 1 page front and back, make sure that you think about the whole page as a composition. So, you didn't run through half of the second page. There's some sort of graphic layout attentiveness to the overall document that you're putting forward. So just keep that in mind. Well, a lot of what designers are going to be asked to do, if you're an entry-level position, is graphic collateral. So we really want to be able to convey your overall design presentation skills. So whatever page you're using, use all of it and be thoughtful.
Yeah, let me also say that the science is loud and clear about how much time people are actually reading things. If you're organizing something that's longer than a page, make sure that the first couple things that are in your resume are the things that people need to see. So your contact information and the places that you've worked in the past, and possibly your education background, are some of the most strategic things to put on there. Make it the first things you see. People are spending 5 minutes or less on resumes and portfolios on a very typical basis. I usually recommend that portfolios are no greater than 30 pages total, ever, period. 20 pages, I've heard many times, is the max. You've got big firms like Big, for example, that might get 100 resumes in a month. The people that are sometimes hiring and firing from these groups are not spending a ton of time like reading every piece. So be careful about that.
Well, and these are compositions too. We are visual, spatial, artistic people. And so a carefully created composition speaks volumes, just not by just ease of reading, but comfort and creating something that's beautiful.
Yeah, and to that point of, you know, how little time gets spent on them, I would say another thing that goes right at the top, and I do find the infographics really helpful, is your software skill set. So show me on that bar or dial or whatever, what are your skills in Revit, Autodesk, whatever, Adobe, whatever the tools that you are using. I mean, especially if you're doing, you're really good at 3D modeling, digital design fabrication, be sure to highlight those things.
Yeah, you could actually have a QR code on your resume or in your portfolio that could take them to an animation or something like that. So if they want to find out more about you, and it's not actually just nested that way, you know, I mean, in your portfolio. So we've done that as well. We've had people who've done that, and that's kind of a nice thing to have as well.
Great. Richard Perez asked, any certification such as ICC, CASP, CEA, NFPA, and LEED you recommend, which has a competitive advantage?
LEED. That was an easy one.
Yeah,
I think
you're right.
every firm is heavily focused upon sustainability and sustainable design, and that is a recognizable certification. And I always tell people, pass all your architectural exams first, and then jump right onto LEED and get that done in that order, priority.
Yeah, the lead green associate is a good one. I've actually, you know, the licensing exams is a big chunk, and so I started actually with lead as kind of like an initial entry to test taking and credentials. So, you know, take a look at both. I also think it depends on your trajectory, right? Like all of those are really important for different reasons, right? So if you're really interested in a technical path, you might want to pursue ICC. If you really are making it clear to the firm that you're, you know, a designer who's an environmental steward, for sure that you have the lead credential and that you're not just coming to a firm and saying like, hey, I'm really interested in you because you're about sustainability, but I actually don't know anything about the lead credential. You're either, you know, working towards it or it's something that you have. So just, I think, be aware of what those credentials are and make sure that it aligns with your goals. Again, you're presenting your authentic self and where you want to head.
Great, thanks. Kevin, we will be sharing the Zoom recording with the entire group as well as a PDF of the presentation. So you'll get that afterward. Nina asked, should I make a version of my portfolio that best fits the firm position I apply to, or should I provide my whole portfolio and highlight the most applicable projects during the interview?
I think I'm going to jump in there and answer that, at least start it off. If you can tailor the portfolio to the position that you're going after, the work type that the firm has, is probably the best way to go about doing that. Because again, it's catering to what type of work you're going after. You know, if you basically are showing a lot of residential projects to, you know, a school designer like our firm, you know, we're going to say, wow, okay, well, that's great they're showing that, but you know, we're going to have to get this person to kind of get up to the speed of what we're doing. So again, you learn your audience. It is important that you try to cater to the people that you're going after the work with. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, one of my first things that I said was it's a career thing. So make sure that you continue to expand your portfolio with the projects and spend the time creating the portfolio to represent everything that you've engaged with. But the curation is an absolute must. You have to curate it. People are not going to necessarily want to see your full portfolio in an email, or if you're sending something that Karina has to then send off to talent. Like she doesn't want to see all of that per se, especially if it doesn't, you know, if it doesn't meet the criteria of what the job is. But when you come to the interview, I don't think it's out of this world to bring the whole portfolio. It might be something of a talking point, because if they have seen your portfolio already, you can surprise them with more. And that's not a bad thing in a lot of cases, because the more that you talk with somebody, the more you get that opportunity to talk with them and keep them there, the more likely you will impress them with something that you say. It's the idea of word vomit. As much as you can get out, something is going to stick and it's going to be important for them.
I think that's great advice, Andrew. People, I think, appreciate having the opportunity to know that there's more volume to what they've seen already. But I also want to reinforce that when you are in that interview setting, that you're being attentive to reading the room. Make sure that you're making eye contact with the folks that are sitting across from you as you're telling your story. Don't let them get bored. So just because you're excited about the project, you need to make sure that you can continue to engage and understand that they're also excited. And if they are, then feed them more. And if they're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed, then, well, you know that there's more if you want to talk about more.
Great. Are there any last questions before we conclude today's event? All right. Well,
Hi.
oh, go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, I'm going to use my iPad audio because I'm having problems with my computer. But it's great seeing all of you, and thank you. And Karina, I met you in February for the AIA dinner, so it's nice to see you. This question is for Mark. You mentioned about ethics and how to show it in a resume. Could you give an example of that?
Well, I would say, ethics is really important, and I'm trying to think of how I could kind of give you an example of that. And I think that it could be something as, honest, reliable, um, you know, willing to kind of work together. I mean, you want to be able to have really wholesome comments, words that are in there that are going to be, talking about your integrity, how you work with people, and how successful you've been as a good person. And sometimes that's rare, to be able to to kind of experience and share that. So I think that might be good. It might be that you have maybe some recommendations from some of your previous employers that you could have in your resume that would actually reflect your ethics and how well you've been in kind of working through a lot of these things. So just those could be some ways that you could do it. I mean, like I said, references are good. I mean, if you can have people that can kind of attest to your behavior and your timeliness and that sort of thing, and kind of working through and working with others. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to thank again Mark, Andrew, Karina, and Betsy for all the great information today, and thank those that came tonight and listened to this. As a reminder, a recording of this program will be placed on the capX resources page on the CAF website. The CAF website address is here on the screen, as well as my contact information. I'm happy to help you if you have additional questions. Please check out the CAF website. We have scholarships there. We have a capX internship program. Many of you are part of that already, but if you're not, check it out. We also offer an architectural education program that you can volunteer for, and that'd be a great thing to put on your resume. So with that, thank you. And I just wanted to say, keep pushing forward, keep building your network, keep showing up. The profession needs you. So thanks again for coming tonight. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thanks for
Kim.
being here. Thank you, Kim,
you.
for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.